Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going to dive into what is honestly the ultimate historical masterclass on ruthless political maneuvering and intense family dynastic struggles. We're looking at the story of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. And it's pretty shocking to realize that this isn't just a simple historical timeline. It's a gripping, incredibly high-stakes saga about survival, tactical genius, and eventual ruin. We're going to uncover these facts together, tracing exactly how the pursuit of absolute power completely consumed an entire dynasty.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our syllabus for today, so you know exactly how we'll track this timeline. First, we've got the throne or the grave. Second, Shah Jahan's 4 sons. Third, forging power in exile. Fourth, the War of Succession. And finally, an emperor's empty victory. Section 1. The Throne or the Grave, Mughal Succession Rules. There's a quote from our sources that literally hits the nail on the head when it comes to the grim, violent reality of Mughal succession. Either you have the throne or you go into the grave. I mean, talk about high stakes, right? There was absolutely no middle ground for the royal princes. You couldn't just, politely step aside and live a quiet, comfortable life in a palace somewhere. To survive, you literally had to eliminate everyone else who had a legitimate claim to the crown. It was a brutally simple system. Everyone is trying to kill each other, and whoever is left standing becomes emperor.
And to really put that ruthlessness into perspective, just look at this number, 36. That is the number of relatives, including his own half-brother, Khusru, that Aurangzeb's father, Shah Jahan, massacred to secure his own grip on the empire. So when we look at Aurangzeb's later actions, we absolutely have to remember that he didn't invent this cruelty. He was just operating within a vicious, bloody precedent that had already been set by his own father. Section 2. Shah Jahan's 4 sons, a dynasty divided. Now, what's really interesting about this is how geography basically became destiny for these brothers, driven entirely by their father's favoritism. As a Mughal prince, you were given provinces to rule and extract wealth from. Take a look at Dara Shikoh. He was the darling of the family, the total favorite. So naturally, he was given the absolute best, most fertile lands in Punjab and the Ganges belt. Shuja was sent out to Bengal, Murad to Gujarat. But look at Aurangzeb. His father actually perceived him as a threat, so he was deliberately isolated and sent to the harshest, most difficult border regions in Kabul and the Deccan. These were tough lands with far less wealth to extract, specifically meant to keep him weak. This setup created an unbelievable contrast between the two main contenders. On one hand, you've got Dara Shikoh, deeply intellectual, spending his days discussing philosophy with Hindu, Christian, and Muslim scholars. He was a poet who actually wrote that he didn't want to just be a pearl in a shell, he wanted to become the ocean. And then, on the exact opposite side, you have Aurangzeb. Thrust into these harsh borders, he had to become a hardened realist and an expert military tactician, literally just to survive. Shah Jahan thought he was punishing Aurangzeb, but ironically, he was actually forging an iron-willed, battle-tested commander.
Section 3. Forging Power in Exile, the Tactical Masterclass.
Tracking this chronologically, it's like watching a masterclass in strategy unfold. In his early years in the Deccan, Aurangzeb was totally starved of funds. And, well, you need money to pay soldiers, right? So directly defying his father's orders, he targeted the massively wealthy independent states down south like Qutub Shahi and Hyderabad. Hyderabad was unbelievably rich, with global diamond, elephant, and spice trade. By attacking them and squeezing them for an estimated 10 to 15 crores of rupees, he completely bypassed his father's financial control. Over the following months, he used that immense stolen wealth to buy off soldiers and build an unstoppable cavalry. Finally, when news broke that Shah Jahan was falling ill, Aurangzeb enacted an absolute masterstroke. He tricked his brother Murad into an alliance, falsely promising to make Murad the emperor while claiming that he himself only wanted to pursue a quiet religious life. Now, to really understand his political genius, look at how he framed this impending war. He desperately needed a rallying cry against the beloved golden child Dara Shikoh, so he coldly and calculatedly labeled Dara a mulhid. He used this religious curse, basically arguing that because Dara studied defunct philosophies and mingled with other religions, he was an idolater who had to be cut down with an Islamic sword. It was a brilliant, deeply cynical political wedge used specifically to rally Orthodox troops to his side.
Section 4. The War of Succession, a brutal climax.
And this brilliantly illustrates the fatal difference between having theoretical power and actual on-the-ground battlefield experience. The climax kicks off at Ujjain, where Aurangzeb absolutely massacres 10,000 elite Rajput soldiers sent by his own father to stop him. Then comes the fatal error.
Dara Shikoh rides out with a massive, huge army of 40,000 to 50,000 cavalry. But because he's never really been tested on a battlefield, he hesitates south of Agra. For 3 whole days in the sweltering heat, he literally does nothing. Aurangzeb uses those 3 days to rest his exhausted troops and passionately lecture them on religion, sharpening their resolve. When the battle finally goes down, Dara's massive but totally inexperienced forces are completely crushed by Aurangzeb's battle-hardened veterans.
The downfall of the Golden Child is it's tragic and stunningly fast. After the massacre of his army, Dara literally falls from his elephant and has to flee for his life. He runs to Delhi, then pushes all the way out to the Afghan borders, but he's eventually hunted down and captured at the Balan Pass. Brought back to Delhi in chains, Aurangzeb's sister, Jahanara, begged him to spare their brother. But Aurangzeb coldly reminded her that their own father killed 36 relatives for the throne. The cycle of blood was inescapable. Dara was subjected to a trial under Sharia law and beheaded, his ultimate crime officially being the book he wrote, Mingling of Two Oceans. Aurangzeb's ruthless path to the throne was finally complete.
Section 5. An Emperor's Empty Victory. The Final Years.
You know, the great irony of Aurangzeb's life is that the very region that forged his strength ultimately broke him. He spent the last 27 years of his life stuck in a massive, exhausting war down in the Deccan, desperately trying to crush the Maratha Empire. And he utterly failed. He faced fierce, dynamic resistance, especially from brilliant Maratha leaders like Rani Tarabai, whose fluid cavalry tactics made an absolute mockery of the rigid Mughal forces. He eventually died in a military camp in Ahmednagar in 1707. By the end, the once terrifying emperor was just a frustrated, senile old man. He'd kept his soldiers away from their homes for nearly 3 decades, and the entire Mughal system was breaking down. Behind his back, his own exhausted army was openly making fun of him.
As he lay dying, so far from home, the sheer weight of his brutal life really seemed to crash down on him. He wrote a poem that reads, "Life is a twinkle, a breath. Now it was life, now it is death." Our sources note that he died a broken man, full of immense guilt. Think about it. He had spent his entire life spilling the blood of his own family just to gain absolute control, only to realize at the very end that he didn't even know if his God would forgive him. Which leaves us to ponder one final, massive question. Was the ultimate price of the Mughal throne actually worth the guilt? He sacrificed his brothers, his father, and eventually the stability of the very empire he fought so ruthlessly to rule, all for a crown that ended up trapping him in a 27-year military camp far from home. It is an incredible real-world lesson on the heavy psychological and historical cost of absolute power. That's all for today's explainer. Keep asking the big questions, and we'll see you next time.